It says I'm on live now. No, you're not seeing me? Okay, well, so okay, but I don't want to be live yet. I've got 7 more minutes, right? Okay. Oh, I Well, welcome everybody. My clock says 6 o'clock, so let's get started. Wake up, Patriots. Thanks especially to Ed Henry and the Wake Up Patriots crew for having me sub him here on this Thursday morning, May 30th, 2024. I am out in Arizona where it is sunny and nice and warm. It is beautiful. So welcome everybody. I'm Larry Schweikart. If you don't know my background, I'll give you a quick taste. I grew up in Arizona, went to Arizona State University, go Sun Devils. Got a BA in political science, which was the most useless piece of paper I ever had in my life. All that time I had horrible grades because I was playing in rock and roll bands. And we went on the road as soon as I graduated, and I ended up with a pretty big band opening for such groups as Steppenwolf, the James Gang, Savoy Brown, and the Who sat through our set at the Troubadour. This is the good Who with Pete Townsend, not the bad Who with Dr. Fallacy and those guys. I'm sorry, Dr. Fauci. You'll have to get used to my nicknames. Sometimes I drift into these nicknames without even knowing it. And you can find a full list of those pinned to my Twitter feed at Larry Schweikart on Twitter. Just spell my name right, and you can see it on the books back there. Anyway, we did some pretty big things, but as the movie said, we were almost famous. We didn't quite get there. We were a few steps short, had amazing experiences, but starved. I was 129 pounds, fit into a size 29 jean. I used to tell my students that I know all about communism because I lived it. And that is that we shared everything, had nothing, and starved. So after a while, I wanted to get back to Arizona and to play rock and roll at night, but I needed an easy gig during the day that I thought would pay the bills. And any of you who are teachers, I thought teaching would be easy, right? Anybody could teach. And I did have a degree in political science. And let me make sure I'm not being pinged here. I don't think so. Okay, that's good. I did have a degree in political science. And so I thought I could go teach high school history. One small problem. I did not have a class in U.S. history. So I went back to school in the summer for a 6-week course and took the most amazing class in my life. You know how all it takes is that one person in your life to turn everything around. I don't necessarily mean from good to bad, but completely divert your life in a different direction. And that's what happened. I got a very conservative professor. He used to say he was to the right of Barry Goldwater. And within 6 weeks, I said, I want to be that guy. How do I become a professor? And did I mention I had bad grades? Yeah. Well, he had to vouch for me, and he kind of snuck me in the Arizona State history program for a master's degree. Then they did me a big favor. They kicked me out and said, you got to go to a better school that can get you a job. And so I ended up at the University of California, Santa Barbara, which at the time was a very good school, had a number of super high profile profs on the faculty. And I got with a guy who got me a job on one phone call. So I then went to the University of Dayton, where I taught for 30 years. Halfway through that time, I'd been writing nothing but academic books. If you've ever read an academic book, I mean, they have their purpose, right? But they're boring usually, and they're not meant to be read by general audiences. And the best you can ever hope to get out of one is a footnote. Well, I wanted to have something better. I wanted people to read what I was writing. I spent all this time doing research. Somebody ought to read this. So in the mid to late 1990s, I began to write what they call trade books, books meant for popular audiences, regular people everywhere. And believe it or not, when Mike Allen and I started work on our New York Times #1 bestseller, A Patriot's History of the United States, we did not have in mind Howard Zinn and his book, A People's History of the United States. We just wanted to write a book that we could teach from. We'd both been professors for a long time. We were tired of teaching this Marxist junk from these terrible textbooks, even some of the old reliables by the 1990s, such as the National Experience or the American Pageant, which is probably the best-selling history textbook out there. They were way to the left. And just as an aside, if any of you guys want to know how to quickly check a textbook to see if it's drifting left, go to the index, look up Reagan, and then see what it says about Ronald Reagan. I used to call this the Reagan pregnancy test of a book. And it was kind of funny because I think it was Colbert, one of the leftist shows, when I came out with a book called 48 Liberal Lies, and I mentioned this on Fox, have this Reagan pregnancy test. One of the comedians showed a picture of Reagan pregnant. He thought that was funny. I thought it was pretty cool too. But so we wanted to write a book that would be accessible to ordinary people and which we could use in teaching our classes. And what emerged was the book you see behind me here, A Patriot's History of the United States, which came out in 2004. Now, we did not think we were even going to get a publisher, folks. We thought we're going to have to sell this out of the back of a van, like, banned items in California, like plastic straws. Buddy, plastic straws, Patriots History of the United States, right? But we did get a publisher, a very good one, Sentinel, who was with Penguin Random House now. And so we gave it to the publisher in its original form. Now, any of you ever seen this book, it's big. It's 947 pages. Well, it was double that. It was 2,000 pages when we first gave it to the editor. And my agent goes, that's not going to work. We got to cut some. So they cut this book by half, if you can believe that. Any of you who have the book, you'll know, oh my gosh, what did they cut out? Well, I'll get to that later in the show. But meanwhile, the book came out in 2004, did great, had great reviews. And then I settled into writing other books. 6 years later, in 2010, I was on the Glenn Beck show. Now, any of you who are older will remember Glenn Beck's show when he was at his peak. I mean, he had more viewers than Tucker Carlson, and Carlson was at his peak with Fox. Glenn had 3.5 million nightly viewers, and I gave Glenn the book when I was on the show, and he goes, do I know this book? I know this book. Well, I knew he didn't know the book because, folks, if you read the book, the correct answer is, this is a great book, right? And so we went ahead, did the show, and he called me a couple of days later. He said, Larry, when you were on the show, I hadn't read your book, but I read it over the weekend. It's a 1,000-page book. He said, this is a great book. And he started holding it up every night, put it on his stage, on his prop there on his desk, mentioned it many times a night. Best history book you've ever seen. It went straight to the top of the New York Times list. And I finally got the call from the publisher, and they go, Larry, your book's going to be #1 on the New York Times list this week. I went, yay, good, woo. They go, no, you don't get it. It's going to be #1. I said, no, I heard you. That's great. No, you don't get it. Your book's going to be in Target, Costco, Walmart. I said, wait a minute. Our book's going to be in Walmart? Thank you, Jesus. Because it meant what? We had finally gotten out to ordinary people, to giving the book to people who I wanted to have read the book. So that was great. So that's my background. Since then, I've developed a course I'll talk about later in U.S. history and then in world history to go along with the book. But let's get into some political talk, because that's why you're here, right? That's why you want to wake up in the morning and watch this show. So let's dive in here. First, I want to look at what deep trouble Joe Biden is in. Now, if I occasionally slip and call him Rutabaga, that's because that's my nickname for him. But I'll work on it and try to call him Joe Biden. And Biden is in very, very serious trouble. Richard Barris, who I think is probably the best pollster in America since 2016, he's really only missed one race badly. That was the Kari Lake race in Arizona in 22. He had her winning by 2, and I think she lost by 2. Little outside margin of error. But on election night 2016, I was in a back room, a Twitter message room with Rich, and we were talking about the returns as they came in. And Rich called Florida an hour before the networks, including Fox, and called Pennsylvania 3 hours before the networks. He said, it's over in Pennsylvania, Trump has won. Since then, he has been uncannily accurate. Rich's latest poll came out yesterday. I can't give details because they're still being withheld until the whole poll comes out. It's an interesting poll, though, because he polled such things as food freedom. Should you have the right to go buy food from a farmer directly without government interference? Questions like that. But his big picture polling was, of course, Trump and Biden. And the bottom line is that Trump was up 51 point something to Biden's 49. It was a 2.5 point Trump lead, but even more important, Trump was over 51 in this poll. And again, Rich is incredibly accurate. So this is basically curtains for Biden. You can't have your opponent over 50% by, let's call it June 1st, and hope to pull that out. Moreover, just like all the other polls, Biden is way down in his approval ratings, 36, 37, 38%. No president in American history has ever gotten elected with approval numbers that low at this point in the game. So don't let people say, oh, polls aren't predictive. They are absolutely predictive. And by the way, Rich is matched on real clear politics. I think he's higher on Trump by about 0.5 point than all the others, but they're all saying the same thing. Okay. But I want to dive into just a couple of other polls here that are swing state polls, because this is where the rubber meets the road, right? And we're all talking electoral college, which the Democrats desperately want to get rid of because they lose it. So here it is. Cook Political Report, in its swing state of polls, had Trump up in every state, swing state, that would be Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada, every swing state except Michigan, where Trump was down 1 point in Michigan, and Nevada, which was tied. Now, this is interesting, and I know it's hard to follow numbers here unless you're jotting them down. But what's interesting about all these swing state polls, they are all in exactly the same territory, but they each kind of flip out a different state in terms of Trump being down or up. So, for example, 2 weeks ago, and this one freaked out the liberals. I mean, they were going nuts. Psycho Joe and Joe Scarborough, were down there just denouncing this poll. It's a New York Times Siena College poll, which they just worship at this altar, the New York Times. And they were just saying how irresponsible of these people to put out this poll. Well, so what did it show? It showed Trump was up in all the swing states except Wisconsin, where he was down 1. You see what I mean? They're all showing the same general trends. They might flip out a state or two, but basically Trump is up in all of them. Then there was Barris's state polling, which had Trump up in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia. I think he had him tied in Michigan. I spent 30 years in Ohio. I spent 30 years at the University of Dayton. I can tell you that if any candidate wins Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, the triangle, they're going to take Michigan. Those states, not necessarily Ohio, which has gotten very, very red. Ohio today is not a swing state. It's a Trump plus 10 state. In 2020, it was Trump plus 8. In 2016, it's Trump plus 8.5. But it's gotten much redder since then. And today it's Trump plus 10. Same thing with Florida. Florida is not a swing state. Florida is Trump plus 10 to 15. And I was a little shocked at those numbers until I kept seeing more and more confirmation that the voter registrations in Florida are just off the charts for Republicans. I think they've done a flip of about 1.6 million from Democrats up by 800,000 to Republicans up by 800, almost 900,000 now in Florida. Same thing in Arizona. In Arizona, we've raised the Republican registration advantage to 214,000, which is another reason why Trump's not going to lose Arizona this time, even with some fraud. And it's just too big to rig, as President Trump says. So here you have the biggest states, okay? And the big shockers are that in the last 2 weeks, Trump is down only 9 points in New York. Let me repeat that for you. Trump is down only 9 points in New York. And yesterday, another shocker came out from Roanoke that said Trump was tied with Biden in Virginia. So you can always correctly argue, oh, this poll's an outlier. Oh, that poll doesn't matter. But when you take them all together like this, they pretty much paint a very accurate picture of a campaign in trouble. That would be Biden. And it also paints a picture that says Laura Trump was right when she said that the Republicans are expanding the map. And I believe that before it's over, you'll have very close races or Trump victories in Nevada, Minnesota, Virginia, Maine, New Hampshire, New Mexico. I think those states are all going to be very close and could, Nevada, I think, will go to Trump. The rest of them, Minnesota right now is about a 2-point race. Trump leads in New Hampshire right now. So what I'm saying is this. If you have President Trump leading the popular vote by 1 or 2 points, this is an electoral, almost a landslide. Now, we can't use that term anymore, landslide, because of 2 states, New York and California, as Arnold Schwarzenegger used to say. And without those 2, you can't really have a landslide. But it's going to be very close to a landslide by November, I think, because not only are these polls showing this now, the trend is our friend, and the trend has been going this way for some time over the last year. Remember this also, in neither 2016 nor 2020 did President Trump lead for more than a week in most of these polls. I don't think he ever led in a major poll in 2020. He led a couple of times narrowly in 2016. So now you've had all the polls showing him with the lead for the past year. And that means in the polling business, they have a term called sticky. The numbers are sticky. They aren't moving anywhere. And that's because people have made up their minds. You have very few undecideds at this point because they know both candidates. And I'll make this last point, and we'll get off of polling. People not only know the candidates, people know them as president. They've now lived for 3.5 years under Joe Biden, and then many of them have lived for 4 years under President Trump. And they are all saying, they're all telling the pollsters, Trump's presidency was better. The horror that was the China virus has kind of dissipated a lot in people's mind. You know, it was a bad thing, but that was 3.5 years ago. People, except for a very few minority, a small minority, people more or less forgotten that as an issue. The issues today are without question, number one, the economy / inflation. Number two, illegal immigration. So I'm going to talk about these civil wars that the Democrats have. But just let me take a second here because somebody does have to pay for this. And I want to thank the sponsor, Colonial Metals Group. You know, as we get into more inflationary times, gold and silver are always kind of good to have. So you want to let your team of experts in Colonial Metals Group help you out here, help protect your future, your family's future. And they put together a special offer for you guys. Click on the link in this description below or call a special 800 number that we have for you, and you're going to receive a safe and up to $10,000 in free silver offer. Call this 800 number, 800-805-4034. That's 800-805-4034. Now, I told you all this polling stuff to tell you this. The Democrats currently have what I've been calling for about 6 or 8 months, 2 civil wars going on. 2 civil wars. And the first one is this whole business with Hamas, and the Palestinians, the whole Arab left versus Jews and Israel. These are two very big constituents of the Democrat Party. And as you saw in the primaries, Biden got hammered by the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian side who voted for some other candidate. You've also seen Jews beginning very slowly to defect from the Democrat Party, especially big Jewish donors who said, I can't give to these guys who are supporting Hamas. Well, how is Biden supporting Hamas? Well, he gives some stuff to Israel. It's always with conditions. They're trying to pressure Israel to just get out of Gaza, let Hamas alone, let them stage another terror attack. I mean, what's a few hundred dead people? And that's not going over well with American Jews. So here's the problem. To the extent that Biden and his administration drift more toward Hamas and the Palestinians, they lose more of the Jewish vote. By lose, I don't mean these people are going to vote for Trump. They might, but I don't think so. What I mean is they're either going to leave that slot blank, vote third party like Bobby Kennedy, or not vote at all. Turnout is going to be very important in this election, especially for Republicans. And if Democrats don't turn out, this is a case where the Democrats are really going to have to turn out or they don't have a hope at all. So if the administration drifts too much in the other direction in favor of the Jews and Israel, then you see what you saw in Michigan and Minnesota in the primaries, which is thousands of people stay home. They're just not going to go in and vote for Democrats. So this is a big civil war. And, rub my hands in glee or be the evil emperor from Star Wars. Good, right? They can't fix it. There is nothing they can possibly do to correct this. As I say, because as soon as they go too far in one direction and recover some of those voters, they're going to lose the voters on the other side. It's Civil War number one. They cannot win. Civil War number two is the illegal alien invaders versus the inner city residents of the major cities, New York, Chicago, which I affectionately call Benghazi by the lake, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Philadelphia. And you've seen the videos. The inner city residents are mad. They are upset because all the resources that were promised to them and all these backroom deals for their support are now going to these illegal criminal alien invaders. And this is especially true in New York and Chicago. And the videos coming out of there are eye-opening. The inner city residents specifically saying, hey, this is our money that was promised to us, and it's going to these homeless camps. New York has tried all sorts of things. They've tried to set up, take public schools and turn them into homeless encampments. They tried to ship them off to Staten Island, and people said, "Niet, that's not going to happen." So they're now trying to pretend like they don't exist. And in parts of New York where they put all of them, they're literally just taking over the streets, living on the streets, setting up these street shops and so on and so forth, all unlicensed, all without any control. And what all of this has further added to is the problem with crime in the big cities. So you know what the latest liberal thing is? Well, crime is falling. Violence is falling. Folks, when you quit measuring crime statistics fall. It's as simple as that. When you start having thousands of police walk off, as New York has had in the last 2 years, take early retirement, when you stop enforcing crime, when you tell them don't go after murderers and rapists, when, as in Los Angeles, you have a district attorney, this guy Gascon, the old Disney film, what was it, Beauty and the Beast? No one spits like Gascon, that guy. When you have people like him saying don't enforce any property crimes, that would be theft of under $1,000. Well, people are going to steal right up to $1,000. It's just a license to steal, almost like a 007 movie. Point is, the Democrats can't win this civil war either, folks. They're stuck because the illegal criminal invasion was all their idea from the get-go. It was Biden's policy. He's the one that said, come on to America if you're oppressed, if you're looking for asylum. And of course, the first thing they are told, let me do an aside here. I haven't forgotten where I am. About a couple of months ago, James O'Keefe did a video on these people coming through one of the gaps down there in Arizona. I know once removed the driver who drove him down there. And they were watching the whole process. And what was happening was, as soon as these guys, and they are guys, they are military age, Asian, Middle Eastern, and Hispanic males, but there are a lot of Asians and a lot of Middle Eastern males. As soon as they get over, they are instructed by their NGO handlers, what you're going to do is plead asylum. Just that's the only word you use, is asylum. And so then according to Biden's plans, they have to be processed. And so they will turn around and claim these millions. Right now, the number's about 11 million known illegal aliens in America. It could be as high as 20, but I think it's probably closer to 12 or 13 million. They are now called asylum seekers. So that allows them to come in, right? The Democrats can't win the Civil War because they are on board with that policy. They were with that policy from day one. They started it off. They embraced it. They are the ones inviting these guys in. Remember, they are all sanctuary cities. And Chicago, about 2 months ago, had an election, and they refused anybody to put ending sanctuary city status on the ballot. They just wouldn't allow that to even happen, come up for a vote. Why? Well, they knew they would lose. They knew that the citizens of Chicago are sick of that, and they'd vote that off. And Mayor Adams has gone on to say he's not ashamed of his sanctuary city status. So they're stuck with that. But now they're alienating the inner city residents. And hence, folks, this is why. One of the reasons that you're seeing President Trump now in the 20% range with blacks. And I know people keep saying, well, these are polls, they're not votes. And, you know, we've seen high poll numbers before. They don't translate to votes. Barris does extensive one-on-one interviews with respondents. He doesn't just do numbers. He actually talks to hundreds of people per survey. And this shift is real. Barris insists that Trump will get over 15% and maybe as high as 20 to 22% of the black vote this time around, which is huge. Democrats cannot win if they're not getting 90% of the black vote. It's just a problem. Same with Hispanics, who also are in the inner cities and have some issues with these illegal invaders. And Trump is up in the 46, 47% range of the Hispanic vote. Now, remember, I keep saying this, we're May 30th, June 1st. We've got 5.5 months to go here before the election. And these trends are just going to continue. They're not going to get better. How are they going to get better? Are they going to deport any of these people? No. There's only going to be more of them come in. Are they going to magically find new money or print it up? No. Cities can't do that. So they're going to have to take resources from somebody else. They're going to have to steal inner city residents' resources to do this. So you see why the Democrats now have two ongoing civil wars, and they can't win either of them. And that's why, in my opinion, Biden has no hope whatsoever of recovering any of his lost ground. He can get worse, but he can't get better because there's no issue for him to get better. And of course, we haven't even talked about the economy and inflation, which you all know too well. It's one current talking point. If you go on Twitter and you read some of the liberals, which I hate to do, but that they infest my feed somehow. I don't know how. But anyway, these liberals are all saying, oh, the economy's great. This Stephen Ratner guy, you know, who's a spokesperson for the Rutabaga administration, is always out there trying to tell you how great the economy is. And he always has statistics. And one of these guys who, like Goebbels, was very good at lying with statistics. And there's a big difference between statistics and your life. and you know what you are paying for groceries. My wife and I'll admit it, we shop Walmart. My wife says if we were multi-millionaires, we would still shop Walmart because that's where the best deals are. And so we will go to Walmart every 2 weeks. Under Trump, just 5 years ago, we would go to Walmart, and in a 2-week period, we would spend around $400 to $500 max, usually around $450 at Walmart for 2 weeks. Now it's almost always $550 to $650. So prices have gone up by at least a third, maybe 40%. Gas, I don't know where you live, but gas here in Arizona is still $4 a gallon. Never has gone back down. Under President Trump, it was $1.69. Rent, any of you who are younger and looking at rents, you know the rent's horrendous. My son went out, tried to find an apartment, and all the apartments are $1,400 a month for a one-room kind of joint, right? So all of these things are at the top of the issue food chain that Biden and his people are going to have to deal with, and they're not going to be able to do a very good job of that. Well, let me take a second here and again thank our sponsor, Colonial Metals Group. You can ask Colonial Metals to help you protect your family and your future with a hedge against inflation in the form of silver or gold. And Colonial Metals put together a special offer with Ed Henry and this audience here. So if you'll click on the link that's scrolling on the screen below, you'll get a special 800 number. Call an 800 number and you'll receive a code, and you can get up to $10,000 in free silver on one of their plans. So call this 800 number, 800-805-4034. That's 800-805-4034. Now, let me take a moment here while we're doing an ad and tell you about the wild world of history and the wild world of politics. These are my sites. If you're interested in a history curriculum, go to the wild world of history. I have a full curriculum for high schoolers, but I've had 8th graders and even 7th graders do it. But it's meant for high schoolers that tracks perfectly with my book, A Patriot's History of the United States. 22 chapters, 22 lessons, and me teaching all chapters in high production, high quality video with maps, images, graphs, everything. We have it all built in. We have an AP track if you're preparing your student to take the AP test in history. And with the tests, I have the famous documents-based questions that the AP tests all require. Remember, as a history professor, I know how these things work. It's great. There's no license to expire. The 22 videos are each about 45 minutes to an hour. And I walk you through a Patriot's history of the United States. We've had no complaints in 6 years now that we've been doing this. People just love this program. And look, if you're just a parent and you don't have a high school age kid yet, there's no license to expire. Get the program. Our prices are going up tomorrow. We got to keep up with Biden's discount, right? We're going to give you Biden's discount, which is a 20% price increase. So get it before the prices go up tomorrow and watch the videos for yourself as a parent. You will learn American history like you couldn't believe. Why do we have just 2 political parties? Why do they gravitate toward the middle? Why does government grow no matter which party is in power? What are the 4 pillars of American exceptionalism that make America different from any country in human history, then or now? This is all in the course. And if you want a world history course, we also have a course in world history. Again, with me teaching all 15 units. These are bigger units: Russia, China, India. So check it out. Now, if you're more into politics and you like what you've been hearing here in terms of the analysis, go over to my Wild World of Politics. I do political commentary under the Insider subscription program 3 days a week. And there's all sorts of videos on each of these sites with the VIP and with the Insider. You're going to love it. 50 or 60 hours of video on the Patriots history side and about 40 hours of video on the Wild World of Politics side. Video lessons on people such as Reagan, the American president, or Churchill, integrity, many others. So check those out. All right. I don't read our side. Our side has a lot of doomers. The Bible says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind, right? The most used phrase in the Bible is fear not. Yet what do we have on our side are these hand wringers, these doomers. I'm not going to name names, but if you go on Twitter, you know who I'm talking about. They always end with, "You're not going to vote your way out of this." Really? We voted our way out of every other situation except the Civil War. All right. You think there's going to be a Civil War? If so, who are you going to shoot? So I'm not at all down with the doomers on our side. I call them McClellans. Now, if you know Civil War history, you know that the Union had a general who was very good at organizing troops, very good at supplying them, very good at training them. He just wasn't so good at actually using them in battle. And this guy's name was George B. McClellan. He was a Democrat, by the way, hired by Lincoln to run the Army of the Potomac. Well, anyway, McClellan, who always outnumbered his opponent, usually Robert E. Lee, several times over, sometimes 2-1, always thought he was the one who was outnumbered, that he had to be careful. Well, what about this? Well, what if the rebels come around this direction? Well, what if they go here? What if they go there? He was a what about. We have a lot of what abouts on our side. Yeah, but what if they steal the election? Well, what about this? Well, what if Biden steps down? Biden, by the way, let me digress. Biden is the nominee. I've been saying it and saying it. This is a line from Independence Day. You remember Randy Quaid, Russell Case in Independence Day, guy who said he was abducted by aliens in that cafe. He goes, "I've been saying it and saying it. Ain't I been saying it?" I've been saying for months that Biden is the candidate. They needed to switch him out last year if they were going to do that. They can't do it now. And now the most recent clear evidence that he's the nominee is that they are going to have a virtual convention to nominate him because he was going to get kicked off the Ohio ballot. Trust me, if they were going to switch him out, they wouldn't be doing that. So no, they're not going to bring in they're not going to bring in Gavin Newsom, or Michelle Obama or John Bon Jovi or anybody else. They're stuck with Biden. They're stuck with him. So I've been reading these people. What if they switch out Biden? What if they put somebody else that can? What if Biden dies? Well, if something happens to President Biden, you get Kamala Harris. Simple as that. Do you really think that the Democrats are that stupid that they would try to remove the first female Black vice president and hence president to be from the ticket? Do you really think they're going to do that? You want to talk civil wars? They would have Civil War number 3 there. They would lose a ton of their remaining Black support. It would just be off the charts. So I read Democrat insiders. I read what James Carville, what Rui Teixeira, what Stan Greenberg, what Mark Penn, all these people, I read what they are saying, and they are terrified. If you don't think so, just look at the last 3 or 4 clips of James Carville, where he is just melting down. He's using foul language, which we almost never did in public clips. By the way, my wife and I saw old Jimmy in Las Vegas. We would go out when we were in Vegas. We'll go out early in the morning and walk 3 or 4 miles around the strip. And we're walking, and this guy with a bald head and a headband, kind of looked like a snake, goes jogging by us. And my wife goes, "Was that James Carville?" I turned around and go, "Why, yes, it is." And I yelled, "James!" And he turned around and looked at me, and I said, "You're wrong." And he glared at me and then went running off. So he's terrified. I mean, he knows they're going to lose, and he knows they're going to lose because they're using, among other things. Let me start again. James knows that they have big problems. James Carville's problem is that he thinks it's the message and not the policies. He thinks that they just change their messaging, they can fix it. No, no, no. It's your policies. People don't want illegal invaders. People don't want 8% inflation. People don't want 7% home mortgages. People don't want the unemployment we have. And again, these economists will put out these unemployment numbers. So, oh, look, employment's doing great. Look, unemployment is falling. This is people working multiple jobs. What you are not seeing are the numbers of people in the workforce. Notice they don't ever bring out the numbers about people in the workforce. What does that tell you? If the number of jobs are growing, but the number of people in the workforce are the same, people are working 2 jobs. And we could go back to, was it In Living Color that used to do the skit about the Jamaican family that was working 3 and 4 and 5 jobs each, that kind of thing. So we're almost there. So I read these Democrat insiders. Politico this week. Now you have to understand who and what Politico is. Politico is the Democrat mouthpiece, okay? More so than somebody like Vox. It's Politico and The Hill. If the Democrats are trying to get word out, if they're trying to get a message out to their kind, they will use a kind of made up story or an opinion piece in Politico or The Hill. So Politico said this week that Democrat insiders were freaking out because Biden was so bad and they can't replace him. They know they can't replace him. All right. So I want you to look for this sign that Biden is done. You will start to see when it looks like people know he's absolutely going to lose, that there's just no hope. No. And by the way, they are saying this. All these insiders are all saying this, knowing they can't steal it again. Why? They can't steal it because their entire strategy this time was not based on fraud. It was based on lawfare. It was based on get Trump in the courts. Well, how's that going for them? Well, 2 of the cases are on hold until the Supreme Court gives its immunity decision. And my court source, Zen Master, is almost sure that this is going to result in a remand. What does that mean? It means the Supreme Court is going to tell the petitioners that the case must be remanded or sent back to the earlier court to adjust for these immunity issues. They're going to lay out certain elements of immunity and they're going to send it back. They're not going to rewrite immunity law themselves. They don't want to do that. Believe me, they want to avoid as much of this as possible. So basically, they're going to punt it back to the other team for another couple of months. And so if by any chance these courts or these DAs, these DAs rewrite the cases to adjust for the Supreme Court's immunity ruling, they still aren't going to get it back on court dockets before the election. If you understand how these court dockets work, they line cases up months and months in advance, especially in these federal courts. And so Trump's cases, the one in Atlanta and the one in Florida, which looks like it might be overturned even before this, are not going to even see the light of day until after the election. And assuming Trump wins, 2 things would happen. Either he would just go forward and pardon himself after he's inaugurated in January, or knowing that he's going to go forward and pardon himself, these people will just drop these stupid cases. And that all assumes that somebody like Fat Fannie Willis herself isn't brought up on charges and has to resign. They have to start all over again. This leaves, of course, the current trial in New York. And as of this morning, most people think we have a hung jury. The indication for a hung jury, as Robert Barnes said the other night, was that you have jurors asking for more information. Whenever jurors start saying, can you tell us more about this? Or can you send us a transcript of this testimony? Or what were the court's instructions on this, that, or the other? If they were going to convict right out of the gate, they would have done it and they wouldn't have needed any of that stuff. So most people think, including Alan Dershowitz and Robert Barnes, most people think that there's a hung jury going on there and that there's one or two holdouts. And so the question is, how long do they hold out? And if they hold out, then Mershon, the judge, this corruptocrat, this utter idiot, this mind-numb chowder brain, it will do one or two things. He will either declare a mistrial and Bragg will have to start the whole process all over again, which he probably would do, or there is an outside chance that Mershon, who's kept around the alternate jurors, will find some reason to replace the hung jurors. Barnes said he'd seen this in some of the cases he'd worked, where a judge actually dismissed a juror for being sick, having a cold, and the juror wasn't even sick. But it was the judge's way of getting this guy out of the way so he could go ahead and have a conviction. Mershon, you go, well, why is this guy doing this? This guy, he's clearly unconstitutional, illegal, criminal in virtually everything he's doing in the court. Why is he doing it? And the answer is he is a dyed-in-the-wool communist liberal, and he believes he is cementing his place in history by being the judge that got Trump. And so it doesn't matter if he's overturned down the road. For now, he is he's doing God's work. All right, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to give you the secret as to what to look for in these upcoming months when you know that the Democrats have left Biden. So let me, for the last time here, remind you of our sponsor, Colonial Metals Group, who has all these experts who can help you in this time of inflation. Inflation's not going down, right? And gold and silver are always wonderful hedges against inflation. Let them help you with your future, your kids' future. And so Ed and his Colonial Metals team have put together a special offer. Click on the link and in the description, or call the special 800 number that we have below, 800-805-4034, 800-805-4034. And they will set you up with a special offer that could give you up to $10,000 in free silver. So check that out. And I want to thank Colonial Metals for having me on this morning. All right, so let's get to this. What should you look for to see that the Democrats have given up on Biden? They're going to hang with him until after he's nominated and they have their fake convention in Chicago, which itself should be quite an entertaining venue. If you're old enough to remember the 1968 Democrat convention in Chicago, where 11,000 hippies and about 9,000 FBI, Secret Service, and National Guard descended on the parks there and had a brutal fight. I mean, there were billy clubs all over the place. You remember that great scene in the movie Trading Places where Eddie Murphy, who's now become an honorable citizen, upstanding citizen, goes out and he sees somebody being arrested and he goes, "May I suggest you use your nightstick, officer?" You're going to see a lot of people saying, "Yeah, use those nightsticks." So it should be real fun to watch the Democrat convention. The Democrats are going to stay with Biden through the convention. But here's what to look for. Look for state and local politicians who are on the ticket to start distancing themselves from Biden. Look for them to stop mentioning his name, to stop mentioning any of his policies, indeed to begin to criticize his policies like Kyrsten Sinema did in Arizona before she was forced to drop out, like Joe Manchin did before he was forced to drop out. It's difficult because the Democrat rank and file love them some illegal aliens. They love them some Hamas and some Palestinian stuff. But nevertheless, the people who are trying to get elected know they can't win with just Democrats, that they need the independents and they need some Republicans. And they're not going to get a single crossover vote if they continue with these programs that Biden has now put in place. So look for the state and the local politicians who are running for office, people like John Tester up in Montana, people like Sherrod Brown in Ohio, people like Ruben Gallego in Arizona, people like that. Look for them to start distancing themselves from Biden and even criticizing Biden in various ways. Now, this brings up another point I wanted to get to, and then I've got kind of a funny story for you to end all this. And that's the Trump GOP gap. What we're finding, and I just named you 3 races where the Republican is either only tied, as in Montana, or slightly behind, as in Ohio, or behind over 10 points, as in Arizona. What explains this? How can that be if Trump is doing so well? And as I said, Trump is going to win Ohio by 10 points. How can we have a Senate candidate there who's losing? And this is what I call the Trump GOP gap. There is a gap in voters' minds between President Trump, who personally is being persecuted and they see as a victim in many ways. Black voters especially have said that he symbolizes their struggle with police and government. They don't trust government. To go back to another poll, just last week, there was a poll out that showed those who say they don't trust government overwhelmingly back President Trump. But what about the GOP? Not so much. What's happening is that Trump has opened up a 5 to 7 point gap over many of these people who could even be Trumpers, people like Kerry Lake or Bernie Moreno. But it's not reflected in the polls. And what's happening here is very clear, that people don't yet trust the Republican Party. And you know why that is when you look at that last vote Mike Johnson had to send more money to Ukraine. Americans, but particularly Republican voters, are sick of this. Now, let me say this, and you're not going to want to hear this. I know you guys. I know what you're thinking. Many of the congressmen who voted for that UK aid come from rhino districts that want to send money to Ukraine. They're not all like me. They're not all like you. Many people, and I took a tour group to the Reagan Ranch and the Reagan Library a year ago. And I spent a lot of time in a van with 6 or 7 people. And one of those ladies was very much, we got to stop Putin. He's going to want to take over all of Europe if we don't stop him. The whole domino theory thing. I don't want to digress too much, but let me tell you very quickly why I think the domino theory with Putin doesn't apply. Putin is if you want to say, an autocrat, a kind of Napoleon figure, sees himself as this great leader, but he is not. He may be in his heart, but he does not govern like a diehard communist. He is not an ideologue out to spread communism. He is a nationalist out to spread Russia. And there's a big, big difference. That is, he's going to settle for solid gains in Ukraine when he's convinced he can protect those areas from outside interference. He's going to stop, because he's not out to spread communism around the world the way that Khrushchev and some of these other guys were, Stalin. So I don't see them as at all the same. But many of those who are part of this Trump GOP gap are rhinos who still believe that Russia is this communist state trying to spread its tentacles around the world, and they want to oppose Russia in Ukraine. And unfortunately for you and me, a lot of these people have control of a lot of districts out there, and we shouldn't say that they aren't being represented. Those congressmen, those congresswomen are not representing you and me. They're representing those pink districts. They're not red anymore. And I know one of them up in Scottsdale. The guy's actual name is Schweikart. It's spelled different from mine. He has an E instead of an A. But he represents one of these pinker districts. And he has to go along with this kind of Ukraine funding because that's what his constituents want. Okay. So you can't say on the one hand, oh, we aren't getting any representation from our people in Congress, and then turn around and say, well, those people who still favor Ukraine aid, their congressman shouldn't vote for it. He's representing them. All right. So point is that there is a gap between Trump and the GOP. It's probably about 5 points. This is why you don't see Republicans overall gaining with blacks. They are gaining with Hispanics, but not as much with blacks as Trump does. They don't yet trust the GOP to do the right thing. They don't yet trust them the way they trust President Trump. And they haven't seen the same spine, the nerves of steel that Trump has had out there for them. So until the GOP can mega-ize and totally merge with Trump in the minds of the voters, I think you're going to see this gap. And that's why in places like Ohio, Montana, and especially Arizona, the candidates have to be within 3 or 4 points on election day. They don't need to lead, but they need to be within 3 or 4, and Trump can pull them over. He's good for about 5 points. All right. We only have 5 minutes left, and I thought you guys would enjoy this. We'll take a break from politics here. It begins with kind of a sad story. Doug Inglis, the lead singer and songwriter of Iron Butterfly, the rock group from the 70s, he wrote In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. Even if you weren't aware during that era, as I was, you know this song. It's such a famous song because when it originally came out, it was about 12 or 15 minutes long. It was longer than almost any song. And it featured extended organ, guitar, and especially a very extended drum solo. And famous drum solo. Now, it's not particularly great. Drummer's just okay. But he did something that was extremely good in the song, and he started just a few notes, ba-da-da-da-dum-dum, bum-bum, da-da-da-dum-dum, bum-bum, and then he built it up until by the end he's going like that. Here's a story behind that song. When I did our movie, Rockin' the Wall, it's a documentary you can find on the Wild World History website. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on Amazon. It's a story of how rock music helped bring down the Iron Curtain. And we interviewed The Doors, Quiet Riot, Toto, Vanilla Fudge, all these people from the other side of the Iron Curtain. Well, one of the people we interviewed was George Shadow Morton. Shadow Morton is a legendary producer, and his story is worth hearing. He began by going to the Brill Building in New York City, which is known as Tin Pan Alley, because of all of the people pounding on piano keyboards. It sounded like people beating on tin cans. They were songwriters back then. That's where all the songwriters went to do Broadway musicals and everything else. And so Shadow Morton's in the Brill Building talking up this girlfriend, Ellen Green, and there's a guy sitting over there hammering away on piano for a song. And Shadow turns around and goes, "That's a terrible song." And the guy goes, "Yeah, you think you can do better?" And Shadow said, "Yeah, I think I can. I'll be back in a week." Now, Shadow Morton did not read music and he didn't play a musical instrument, but he assembled a 3-girl team and he wrote a song called Remember, Walking in the Sand, which became a hit. I don't know if it's number 1, but it got up there. The group was called the Shangri-Las. So he brought that back and the guy's mouth dropped. He goes, "You do that again?" He says, "Give me a month." He went back with the same group and he wrote a song called Leader of the Pack. So anyway, Shadow Morton went from that to becoming a producer of Janis Ian, Vanilla Fudge, and Iron Butterfly. When he had Iron Butterfly in the studio, they couldn't get In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida right. They kept screwing it up. And Shadow said they tried everything, including weed, alcohol. The boys just couldn't get it right. And so he said, "You guys rehearse the song. We've got a problem in the board. I'm going to fix it. You guys rehearse the song." And then he gave the engineer the roll tape sign. So Iron Butterfly started playing In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, and it was so good, he kept popping up from behind the board going, keep playing, keep playing. I still have a problem here. Of course, there was no problem with the board. And they kept playing, and he kept giving them the keep playing song through these long solos. And when the drummer did this solo, he's going, yeah, keep playing, keep playing. When it was all over, he pops up and they said, and they ended the song. They said, all right, we're ready to record now. And Shadow Morton said, that's okay. We got it. Next song. So that's how one of the greatest songs in rock and roll history came to be. All right, guys. Well, it's been fun subbing here for Ed Henry and Wake Up Patriots. I'm Larry Schweikart with the Wild World History and the Wild World of Politics. Go to either site, sign up for the VIP on Wild World History. You'll get all sorts of historical content, or sign up for the Insider on Wild World of Politics, and you'll get my commentary 3 days a week. And my newest book, Patriots History Globalism, is out now. Grab a copy of that. And I probably will be seeing you guys again soon, unless you really hated me, and then I won't come back. All right, see you later.